Israel announced the start of its operation into Gaza City, declaring Gaza is burning. An Israeli military official says the Israeli Defense Force had begun the main stage of their ground operation into Gaza City, the main urban center in the enclave, where Israel has ordered hundreds of thousands of residents to flee. Residents said bombardment of the city had been ramped up dramatically over the past 2 days. This through heavier explosions that destroyed dozens of homes and naval boats. All right, let's get you the very latest now. SABC News correspondent Blake Sifton joins us now live from Tel Aviv. Good afternoon, Blake. It's good morning, I suppose, there to you. But Blake, just before this development, families of hostages had already condemned the escalation of the offensive, but it has now been taken to another degree. Just share with us the situation on the ground and just what we saw a short while ago.
Good afternoon. That's right. Just as rumors were beginning to swirl that this main Israeli offensive into Gaza City was beginning, the family members of the hostages still held captive in Gaza went to Jerusalem, and they protested in front of the home of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. They camped overnight in protest, and they've said today that they are going to stage an occupation in front of his house, that they will stay indefinitely to protest, and that every night an additional protest, a large protest, will be held there. And that's because they've said that this offensive to seize and occupy Gaza City is a death sentence for their loved ones. They've been hoping for these weeks of buildup that it could be prevented. In recent days, we've heard reports that Hamas have taken the surviving hostages out of the tunnels and have brought them above ground and are essentially going to use them as human shields to put them in the way of the Israeli offensive. So the family members of the hostages are completely outraged by this development and are very concerned for their loved one's fate.
And what has been the IDF's rationale in persisting or pursuing this ground offensive at this point?
So it's interesting because the Israeli military itself is said to be against this operation. Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir has challenged the government. He suggested alternative arrangements, but the Israeli government has been pushing ahead with their promise to occupy the remaining 25% of Gaza City, as well as central area and southern Gaza that they didn't control. So the military is following orders, and after a night of very intensive bombardment this morning, it became clear that now 2 divisions, including tens of thousands of soldiers, have begun pushing in to new areas in Gaza City where they hadn't currently been operating. We understand that in the coming days, an additional division, including tens of thousands of more soldiers, will join them. I should note that this is expected to be a gradual and phased operation, so it's not like they're going to drive into the center of Gaza City in the next few days. But it is a major escalation. They say they're destroying Hamas infrastructure. And in preliminary operations on the outskirts of Gaza City over the past weeks, what destroying Hamas infrastructure, including tunnels, has essentially meant is destroying thousands and thousands of buildings, including civilian homes. Satellite imagery of those areas that they've been operating in, neighborhoods like Zaytun and Sabra and Shajaya, has shown that large swaths of those neighborhoods are now completely flattened and in some cases bulldozed. So we'll see if a fate like that is in store for the new parts of Gaza City they are entering.
Blake, most certainly a major escalation, because in real time, as I'm speaking to you, this is now the second bombing that we've just witnessed. So most certainly a very volatile situation on the ground. Can you share with us exactly what is happening on the ground insofar as those living in Gaza right now? Because a week ago, the IDF did order or issue that order for residents to evacuate the city. But one can only wonder if there are no impediments for those who want to leave, that in as much as there has been this call to say evacuate, is it not too difficult if certain routes are blocked?
Absolutely. So the military again reiterated their demand that the civilian population leave, calling Gaza City a dangerous combat zone, saying go to the south. Now, there's some 1 million people in Gaza City, and the military has said now that they believe 350,000 have left. So there's still 650,000 civilians remaining in Gaza City. I spoke to a contact of mine today, and he described scenes of chaos. He said that people who want to leave, there's often not vehicles to take them. The cost of how much it is to be relocated, to pay to have you and your family relocated from Gaza City to the south, has now increased to $2,000. Of course, that is far beyond the means of many people in Gaza in this situation. And even people who can afford to leave and who are leaving, the road, it's one coastal road from Gaza City down to the Molasse area where people have been ordered to go. And he says that road is now so choked with vehicles that a drive that should take 20 minutes can take upwards upwards of 7 hours. So scenes of desperation in Gaza City. Of course, many other people say they're unable to leave, even if they wanted to, because they're too sick or they're too injured. Of course, Gaza City is the epicenter of the famine that the UN says is gripping much of Gaza. And still other people say that they don't think anywhere in Gaza is safe, so they intend to remain where they are. And of course, if this operation reaches the center of Gaza City, it's going to become very dangerous.
And a very important point that you raised there around the inability to actually move. It's not that you have residents that are not heeding the call, but would that not in a later situation be seen as a clear contravention of international convention when we speak of what can and cannot take place in war? That you have now ordered people to evacuate, but there's simply no means. You've got one road, as you speak of. Beyond that, it's also become quite costly for many people to move. I mean, if you're trying to move 1 million people at one go, most certainly there would be a delay. But if you already now have activated your ground incursion, people will die. But they will be blamed and said you didn't heed the call.
It's certainly a major problem. It's interesting that when this ground offensive was announced some weeks ago, almost a month ago at this point, the estimate was that the civilian population would be given until October 7th to evacuate. Of course, the very symbolic date of the beginning of the war, and now this is happening much earlier than expected. Of course, we should also note that this began with preliminary operations on the outskirts of Gaza City. People began mostly fleeing to the western part of Gaza rather than leaving, and then within the last 10 days or so, the Israeli military began ordering the evacuation of high-rise buildings where thousands of people were living. And each day, pretty much, once people left those high-rise buildings, those buildings were bombed and leveled to the ground. And that was being viewed as, because those were in western Gaza City, areas where people had been reasonably untouched. So those bombings were being viewed as an effort to frighten people, to convince people to leave. And certainly in the last few days, as those bombings have stepped up, we have seen an increasing rate. But as you say, we're still looking at some 650,000 people remaining in Gaza City, and the rate at which people are able to leave, even if they all wanted to leave today, they're not going to be able to leave that quickly. So the Israeli military has said that this operation will be phased and gradual. So in that sense, they probably won't reach the areas where everybody is living for some time, giving more people time to escape the city. And it could even in of itself be an effort to convince more people to leave. But yes, the difficulties of leaving cannot be overstated.
And then any reaction to this ground incursion by the Israeli allies, such as the United States or the UK at this point? Have they reacted?
No immediate reaction yet, but yesterday when Secretary of State Marco Rubio was in Israel, in Jerusalem, he reiterated full support for the Israeli government. He said that they support Netanyahu's demand that all 48 hostages be released, that Hamas be eliminated, and they really tried to show a united front between Israel and the United States after the bombing of Hamas's negotiating team in U.S. ally Doha, which seemed to show a fracture between the allies. So the United States has not spoken directly about this attack today, but they have been in lockstep with the Netanyahu government ahead of it and in the planning stages of it.
All right, Blake, thank you very much for that reportage. That's SABC News correspondent Blake Sifton live for us in Tel Aviv.